Father, we give you all the glory. You are my rock, my strength and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. You are my rock, my strength and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. Sweet Jesus, beautiful King, no Father like you, no friend like you. Your love for me is everlasting. No one like you, no one like you. Sweet Jesus.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the day the Lord has made. We rejoice and be glad in it. I'm so glad that we are live now. This is the Season Apologies live show coming to you every Sunday. And we're so glad that we're so happy that we're live right now. It's actually raining in Nigeria today. Every rain is pouring down, and we're so thankful for the rain, thankful for the sun. We thank you for the weather, and we thank God for everything. Now, on the show today, we're going to be continuing the episode we've been talking about for a while. We've been talking about the historicity of Muhammad. The topic of discussion has always been the search for the non-existent Muhammad. And Dr. J has been gracious enough to be with us on the show for the past 4 weeks now. This week actually makes it the fifth week for the fifth episode that we've been having. A lot of things have been spoken about. We'll be looking at a lot of things, historical issues, the maps and all of that. And today we're going to be looking at another interesting part of the discussion we are going to be having today. Now, folks, for those of you who are just joining us new today, Dr. J has been doing a whole lot. I won't take much of the time introducing him again because, I mean, he's not new to this show any longer. But because of our time, because I want Dr. J to get into the issue very quickly, I wouldn't need to introduce him again because he's already known to the show. So, folks, please welcome with me as I bring to the program today Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, how are you doing today?
Real good, thank you. Good to be here with you, Korede. It's so nice to be there in Nigeria, though I'm thousands of miles away here in the United States.
So we're so glad to have you on the show again, Dr. J. Thank you very much for your time. We know that it could be very, very early, sometimes in the morning, joining us. We know the time difference is really, really very, very far. But then we're so happy that you're able to join us on the show today. Dr. J, we've been talking about the historicity of Muhammad for a while, and a whole lot of things have been coming in between. There's been a lot of reaction right from some of my friends. Some are so angry that we're talking about this, and some are asking the question, I mean, why would you conceive this in the very first place? So, Dr. J, for the past couple of weeks now, we've been talking about a lot of things. Can you please kindly refresh our mind before we go into the topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, and we're asking the question, did Muhammad exist? In search of the non-existent Muhammad. And the reason we are asking this question is everything we have known about this man, Muhammad, everything that has been told us, everything that you have been taught, everything that we're permitted to hear is only been one narrative. And that narrative has been lifted out of the 9th and 10th century traditions, that is the 800s and the 900s AD, for that which is happening in the 600 AD. So it's 200 to 300 years too late. It is not at the time Muhammad lived. It's not even the right place, because all of those traditions are way up north, way up in what is today Iraq and Syria. And parts of Lebanon and my parts of Jordan and that part of it of the world. Now, that is the difficulty. Since it's so late and it's so far away, should we trust it? And that now explains why we can't find him. We can't find this Muhammad that is in the Quran. He's not really even in the Quran. We can't find him there. We've looked for him, looking at coins. We've looked at him looking at rock inscriptions. We've tried to find him in any documentation. We cannot find his name anywhere. And we cannot even find his city, to say nothing of his book. So what we have been doing, Korede, you've been doing this now for the first 4 weeks. We first looked and we asked the question about his city. And we asked, what about Mecca? Mecca, this city that according to the traditions, existed from the time of Adam and Eve. It's the first city, which means it should be the oldest city. It should have lots and lots of history. Yet it has no history at all. Not one reference of this place called Mecca until 741 AD. Muhammad died in 632. There is the problem. He died 100 years earlier than when it's first referenced on any inscription. The Continuato Byzantia, that is much, much too late for a city that's been there from the very beginning. And it's where Abraham supposedly lived in chapter 21 of the Quran. There you see Abraham. He has a house there in Mecca. He goes down into the Kaaba, that square building, and he destroys all the idols. So certainly, we should have some reference to him, because that was in 1900 BC. 1900 BC. So we're talking almost 4,000 years ago. Not one reference to a place called Mecca at all. Then we looked at the maps. Remember, we looked at the maps already, and we noticed that none of the maps, all of the maps that are from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century. Now, the maps are not really from those centuries. There were no maps of the Arabia that early, but they were actually created in the 15th century and the 16th century, putting together maps of what Ptolemy said. Ptolemy, writing in the 2nd century, describes all the towns that are in Arabia, the country of what is today Arabia, or the continent of the peninsula of Arabia. And none of these maps, none of these descriptions by Ptolemy refer to a place called Mecca. And we looked at I think we looked about 6 different maps. So we found that the very first map that even introduces a place called Mecca is not till 900 AD. That's the 10th century. Muhammad died in the 7th century. I'll keep reminding you this so you see the dates, because the dates are very, very important. Well, we went to what we know as the trade route theory. We looked at the trade route theory put out by Dr. Montgomery Watt in the last century. And he goes and he refers to the fact that when there was all the trade used to go from India, and also from as far away as China, way off in the east, to get to the west. All the trade used to come to the western coast of India. It used to go across the Arabian Sea. It used to go up into the Persian Gulf. And from the Persian Gulf, it would then split and go up through Syria or go across through Jordan and make its way to the Mediterranean. And that was where all the trade went. Until the 5th and 6th century, where you had these two battles, these two big empires. You had the Sasanian Empire, and then you had the Byzantine Empire, who were warring with each other for around 200 years, which shut down the trade going through the Persian Gulf. So it had to be redirected back down around the Arabian Sea, down to Aden, and from Aden, according to the traditions. Remember, this is what the traditions tell us. According to the Islamic tradition, standard Islamic narrative, it was from Aden. It went up from Aden, up to Sana'a, up to Najran, up to Taif, and then down to Mecca. Now, Dr. Patricia Corona, back in 1987, wrote a book on this. And she said, take a look at a map and look where Mecca is. Mecca is off the Western Plateau, down 1,000 meters. And then, so anybody going on that trade route from Taif would have to go down to Mecca. It had no water. There was no vegetation there. Therefore, it could not accommodate any caravans. And then they'd have to go back up 1,000 meters to get up to Yathrib. And from Yathrib, they would go up to Khaybar, then to Tabuk, and then from Tabuk on up to Gaza in the north. So she said this is impossible. So she referred to Montgomery Watt, and Montgomery Watt then said, well, what they did, he said that's how they got and solved this problem. And she debunked that in 1987. And then she went one step further, and she said, what? And remember, this lady reads and writes 15 languages. So she knows all these archaic languages. She reads and writes Akkadian, Syriac, and Nabatean Aramaic. She knows all of these different languages. And these languages, now we're going to have a little bit of noise in the background. That's okay. We're teaching in Nigeria right now. That's okay. So we're going to have people come in and out. So don't worry about it. I'm in a cabin here, way up near the mountains. So there's people coming in and out. We'll just work with that. Now here
That's
we have.
understandable.
That's all right. So now here we have you have this problem of going up the land route. And she said, hold on a minute. I read and write all these languages. She went back to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, up until the 7th century. And she looked at all the trading documents because she could read the languages. Since she could read the languages, it was simple for her. Now, you and I can't do that, we're not able to do that. And all those who are watching right now, try and ask how many of you have ever read Syriac, Aramaic, or Nabatean Aramaic, or have been able to read Akkadian, or even, this is before Arabic even existed. Remember, Arabic didn't exist back then. Arabic was only formed around the 5th and 6th century, and by the 7th century, it still didn't have a script, and so it borrowed from the Nabatean Aramaic script. So this is why she was, in some ways, way ahead of her time. And as she started looking all these trading documents, she noticed there was no reference to any Arab cities in any of these trading documents. Over there in India, none of them had any reference. They were all Eritrea. Agilis is the name that comes up. You know where Eritrea is? Up there in northeastern Africa. And so that's why when she looked at all these documents, they were all reference after reference after reference after reference of these African cities, nothing on the Arabian coast, nothing around over Arabia. And so she debunked that. But then she went one step further. She said, look where Agilis is. Take a look what's there. It's the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a waterway. And you would take the waterway to go up. That's how you got up all the way up to the Gulf of Aqaba and then gone up to Petra. And from Petra, you would then move out over to Gaza and spread out across the Mediterranean world. So this was all being done by water, which makes sense because, and all those who are listening, when you take a ton of goods by land, you can only go about 50 miles by land, which for the same price is going 1,250 miles. That's 1,250 miles by sea. Now, that's why the equivalent, it would have been prohibitively expensive. Now, she debunked that back in 1987. We came up and said, hold on a minute, she didn't go far enough. You need to look at the Red Sea again. Look at the Red Sea using topographical imagery from space. Look down on the Red Sea and look where the water channels are that are underwater. Because when you look at the water channels, remember we did that, Cody? We looked at the water channels and we saw that the water channels, there's the big one right in the center where the big carriers, the big ships go today. But back in the 7th century, they didn't have big ships like that. They had much smaller ships. Look at the water channels, and you can see them there. They're all hugging the African coast. They're all hugging, and they're all stopping at 5 cities. The cities of Agilis, the cities of Asab first, and then Agilis, which are both in Eritrea. The city of Swakin, which is in what is today Sudan, and then the 2 cities of Berenice and Salaga, because these are all the cities, the trade cities that existed way back to the 3rd century BC. So you can see all of it was on the West African coast. And the reason it was on the West African coast, or the West, not out West Africa, it was on the African coast, on the west side of the Red Sea. The reason is because they had water. Where you have water, you have vegetation. Where you have vegetation, you have people. Where you have people, you have cities and ports, and you have civilizations. On the eastern side of the Red Sea, there was no water. It is desert. It's still desert today. It's always been desert. And where you have desert, you have no water. Where you have no water, you don't have people. Where you have no people, you don't have any cities, or you have no civilizations, and you certainly don't have any empires. So she debunked that. We debunked this, however, just in March of this year. So this is brand new material, and they're on Wikipedia. They changed their article because of what we found. So that's just a few months old, that whole debunking. And we then looked at all the Muslim claims for Mecca. And they claimed that Agatharchides, way back in the 2nd century BC, referred to Mecca, or didn't say Mecca, and they never used this term Mecca. But what they talked about was this great temple for all Arabs, and we showed that that is way up in a place called Wadi Ainuna, not at all in Mecca. And because there's 960 kilometers difference between what we know as Mecca today and where Wadi Ainuna was. So that we debunked real quickly. We also looked at the reference to what they said concerning, I'm just writing the name here, Pliny. Yeah, it was Pliny. I think it was Pliny. Yeah, it was Pliny the Elder who talked about Demonogadus Regio. I don't know if you remember that when we talked about Demonogadus Regio. We find that that is on the eastern coast of Arabia, hundreds of miles away. But probably the best reference, the one the Muslims are pushing the most, is this one on Ptolemy's Makaraba. Makaraba has been around for decades now. I remember hearing about this way back in the 1980s when I first got started in the Islamic work. And they were talking about this Makaraba, and that was the Mecca that they were looking for because they needed to find the name. Here's the problem. Look at the word Makaraba. It means the place of the Karib. So even in Arabic, you've got the wrong word. But where they placed it was southeast of what is today Medina, what used to be Yathrib back there. And we realized, what's his name? Not King Gibson. Dan Gibson. Remember Dan Gibson who did all the Qiblas? He showed that no, this is actually, if you look at what Ptolemy's saying, if you look at where he's describing it and compare it with the rivers and the mountains that he describes, because those are still there today, it pushes Makaraba way down into Yemen. It's way down in Yemen today, in the southern part of Arabia, where that Makaraba is. It's not even the word Mecca. And then we looked at Dan Gibson's Qiblas, the Qiblas that he found, and he found, goodness sakes, he found a good 17 Qiblas in the 7th century, the earliest Qiblas, 17 of them in the 7th century, moving up into the 8th century, up until 706. That's just getting into the 8th century, and they're all these Qiblas. These are direction of prayers. They're all facing Petra in Jordan, 600 miles further north. And he found another 8 that are in between. They're not Petra or Mecca. Another 10 that are facing Mecca. And then those only begin to face Mecca in 727. Muhammad died in 632. I have to keep reminding people, look at the dates. When you look at the dates, you will see there was no Qibla facing Mecca at all for 100 years, for almost 100 years after Muhammad's death, proving that Mecca did not exist. It did not exist on the maps. It did not exist in the trade routes. It did not exist on the seas. It did not exist in the Red Sea, and it certainly did not exist in any of the Qiblas. So that destroys any notion that there could be any place called Mecca. Now, hold on. We did one more thing, Corede, and this is where we ended last week. We looked at the 5 stages of the Hajj. When you go to Mecca today, you have to go to that Kaaba that sits right there in the middle of the city, that square building that you circumambulate 7 times, going counterclockwise. That's the Kaaba that everybody prays towards. That's the Kaaba that's there at the center of the world. That's the Kaaba that Muslims have always said is where Adam and Eve were, and that's the Kaaba that everybody now knows today. They say, at least the narrative says, that it's been from the time of Adam and Eve. What's fascinating, take a look at those 5. It's 5 different stages that they do. The first thing is to circumambulate. Where does that come from? Well, when you ask and stop, you say, well, there's a Kaaba in Petra. But we've got even better than that. There's not just a Kaaba in Petra. We know that the original Kaaba is in Jerusalem. Kaaba means cube in Arabic.
Yeah.
What was the cube in Jerusalem and Mount Moriah? It's the Holy of Holies. And it's called the cube in Hebrew, the same word. So they've taken the idea of the Kaaba that was there, the Holy of Holies up on Mount Moriah. Today, in the 21st century, the building that's sitting there is the Dome of the Rock, an Islamic building. But it has no sense of history. That was built in 691 by Abd al-Malik. And he had no idea that was where the Holy of Holies was, but that was the Kaaba that the Jews had always built. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you go to Mecca Day, you circumambulate, you go counterclockwise around this square building. That comes straight out of Judaism again. They are the ones that went 7 times. And see, when you ask a Muslim why the number 7, they don't know why that number, because 7 has no significance in Islam. It does in Judaism. It does in Judaism. That's the perfect number. That's the holy number. That's why they did it 7 times. Circumambulation, most people circumambulate clockwise, but not in Mecca. And the reason why is because the original Kaaba, the original cube, the one at their Mount Moriah, the Holy of Holies, they would circumambulate like they did in Jericho. They would go counterclockwise because God told them to do so, and they just carried on that tradition. That tradition now is carried on in Mecca. So the antecedents to that is from Jerusalem. Then you go and you run back and forth 7 times again. There's that 7 again, between these 2 mountains called Marwa and Safa. Hugely significant, because when you ask a Muslim why they go back and forth between these 2 mountains, they say it's because it's to commemorate Hagar looking for water for her son Ishmael in the desert, running back and forth between these 2 mountains. The problem with that is, take a look at those 2 mountains. Just Google it. Google it. Anybody Google Marwa and Safa, and what do you find? And what you find are 2 rocks, 15 feet high. That's it. I don't know about you, Koredi, but 2 rocks 15 feet high do not constitute a mountain. That is not a mountain. Listen, kids can climb on that. You can see this is a facsimile. This is nothing more than a artificial facsimile of the mountains that were where? Where were those mountains? Those mountains are in Jerusalem. Marwa is the Arabic translation for Moriah. Moriah, Mount Moriah. That's where the Holy of Holies is. Go to Jerusalem. That is where the Dome of the Rock is sitting up there, built by Abd al-Malik in 691. So they've taken this reference to the mountain of Moriah. That is true. That is where Abraham supposedly was supposed to sacrifice his son. At the bottom of that mountain is the Kidron Valley. Across from the Kidron Valley is Mount Scopus. What is the word for Mount Scopus by Josephus? Safa. So there is Safa and Marwa. They're in Jerusalem. So the 2 mountains that now these Muslims run back and forth when they do their commemoration of what Hagar did is from Jerusalem. Now, interestingly, when the Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD and the temple was destroyed and the Jews were thrown out of Jerusalem, many of them went to Petra, and they recreated that in Petra. So you will see a Marwa and Safa in Petra as well. But that comes after the fact. The original Marwa and Safa is Mount Moriah and Mount Scopus across from the Kidron Valley. And the Kidron Valley is known as the Valley of Jehoshaphat. It is also where the apocalypse is going to happen according to the Bible, according to in Hebrew. And it's where Gehenna is. So what is Gehenna today? Today, Gehenna in Islam is there in Mecca. It's Jahannam. You take Gehenna and you make it Jahannam. When you take the G and you make it J. That's it. And you see this all the time because the G and the J are interspersible in both Arabic and in Hebrew. And that's why they've taken even the apocalypse and reproduced it there in Mecca. They've just borrowed everything. You can see the Zamzam well. Well, that's the well that you see also in Petra. It was the pool of Siloam. There in Jerusalem, you can see the Mount Arafat. The Mount Arafat is across from the Kidron Valley, and that is the same mountain that you now have in Mecca. So almost every one of those stages has been reproduced as a facsimile there in Mecca for what was originally in Jerusalem, then taken to Petra, and then recreated in Mecca in the 8th century. Now, let's end with the black stone, and I think that's where we ended last week. The black stone is probably one of the most difficult things for Muslims to defend. What in the world is that black stone doing on the Kaaba there in Mecca? What is that black stone encased by that silver encasing? What's it doing on the eastern corner of this supposedly the most holy place in Islam? And remember, Koredi, every Muslim says that there is one God. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. There is only one God. If there is only one God, what is a stone doing there that they circumambulate around and they all kiss? You kiss the stone so that you forget your sins forgiven. Ask any Muslim, and that's how their sins are forgiven. Who can forgive sins but God himself? What they have done, that black stone has been elevated along with as a deity of God. That is idolatry. That is committing shirk. Anybody who does it is a mushrik. All those tens of thousands of people who do it are mushrikun, masculine plural. Wow, wow, wow. Look at what it says in chapter 9, verse 5. Slay the mushrikun wherever ye find them. Besiege them. Lay in wait for them with all kinds of ambush. That's in the Quran itself. That's what they're to do with the mushrikun. And everybody, you see pictures of them, whole hordes of people circumambulating around the Kaaba, and they all go to kiss the black stone. That black stone is their undoing. And that is idolatry at the very holiest place in Islam. Ooh, I love it. And that's why I'm saying, goodness sake, everything about Islam is borrowed, because even that black stone is borrowed. We've not even got into that, and I'm not prepared to do that yet, because I cannot teach you what I have not put up first on YouTube on my Fander Film site, because we're going to go through and unpack the black stone for all of you. We're going to show you, we now know the history of the black stone. We know where it came from. We know that it predates Islam. We know that it was always known that wherever the black stone went, that was God's presence. So if you move the black stone, God's presence moves. And if you take the black stone, which originally was in Petra, let me repeat that, which was originally in Petra, and you remove it and take it away and destroy the Kaaba in Petra and flee down to the south, as Ibn Zubair did in 687, and you bring it down to Mecca, then God's presence goes with that stone. And when God's presence goes with that stone, the pilgrims follow the stone. The pilgrims follow God's presence. So the pilgrims all started flowing down to to Mecca, no longer in Petra. And that was one of the undoings of the Umayyads. And that's why the Abbasids immediately made an alliance with Ibn Zubair, so they could have God's presence and they could control it. And therefore they could have the allegiance from all the peoples, all the pilgrims. Can you now see? I'm starting now to move to where we're going to go next, because what we need to do now we're back at dinner recon. Let's go to the 7th century itself. We've talked about pre-7th century. We've talked about all these, the place called Mecca. We've talked about all the problems with Mecca. We've talked about all the problems with the 5 stages of the Hajj, and specifically zeroed in on the black stone. Let's now say, well, what then happened in the 7th century? But before we can even actually say what happened, I'm not going to do that today. That's cutting off too much at one time. Let's look and see where the Muslims have defended themselves, because the Muslims are defending themselves and they are struggling. They are having a problem. Put yourself in their place. Here we have all this material coming out from pre-7th century, from before the 7th century, for this place called Mecca, for these people called supposedly Muslims, and for this man called Muhammad, but they can't find it, because we have been asking them. I have been asking this since 1995, when I did my first debate on this with Dr. Jamal Badawi there at Cambridge University here in they're in United Kingdom. I'm no longer there now, and so we're talking about 26 years ago. I did this debate when I asked him, listen, do not waste my time with the 9th and 10th century. I don't want you to just repeat what you've been taught about the Islamic traditions. I want you to go to the 7th century. Go to the 7th century and find Muhammad. Tell me where his city is. Tell me where his book is. The book, the man, and the place. That's why I kept on asking him. I didn't say it at that time. I'm saying it now. But I said, I want to know where this man Muhammad is. I want to know how Islam began. I want to know where the city called Mecca was. And I want to know where the Quran was. And he struggled, and he said, he turned to me in the middle of the debate, and he said, Jay, all you're doing is arguing. You're arguing from what they call the argument of evidence. You're demanding evidence, and there is no evidence. We don't claim that there is any evidence in the 7th century. But the absence of evidence does not mean the evidence of absence. Let me repeat that. The absence of evidence does not necessarily mean the evidence of absence. A trick phrase. You probably heard it before, and that's true. And that's a problem. Whenever you're arguing from silence, and that's what I was doing. I was doing an argument out of silence. There's nothing there. Therefore, there must nothing have been there. That's just the argument of silence. And that's a great argument as far as it goes. But I had no evidence to prove that nothing was there. Everything I was looking at was from the 9th and 10th century, and I wanted to find what they were talking about. I wanted to see the places they were talking about. I wanted to see the peoples they were talking about. I wanted to see the events that they were talking about, and I just could not find it. And that's where he left it in 1995. We're 26 years later. Now, look what we're doing. We're saying, hold on a minute. we are going to show you some evidence. I'm going to show you some evidence. Before I get that, though, I'm going to hold you on pins and needles, because now we do have evidence from the 7th century that completely debunks Islam. We have evidence that completely shuts down any notion that there was any man or a book or a place called Muhammad or Quran or Mecca in the 7th century. But that's going to come. I'm going to hold you there, because I don't want to get ahead of myself. I still want to first want to know what Muslims will say. And this is what they do. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'm going to go and look at where do I share my screen here? I'm sorry. Here we go.
Okay, so you click on the share button.
And I want to go, okay, and I want select which one I want. There we go. And I want to allow. Okay, you have it there?
Yeah. Okay, so
bring it
just
across.
as always, yeah, you would exactly. Okay.
There you go. And so we're going to start here. There we go. You got it?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so here we are. Islam's origin, 7th century. Where was Islam in the 7th century? So let's go and let's look at the first, debunking Muhammad. Now, these are the claims that Muslims make for him. They've got to find him, Corredi. I feel sorry for them. I'm so glad I'm not in their shoes, because they've got to find him in any way, shape, or form. They've got to find references to him. So they start with the Ashtinami letter. This is the Ashtinami. You can see it there on the right there. It's a letter that is very famous. It comes from the St. Catherine's Monastery. St. Catherine's Monastery is in Egypt, and that monastery has been a place where the monks write many manuscripts. It is St. Catherine's Monastery that the Sinaiticus of the Bible, New Testament, was found. The oldest manuscript for the New Testament was found there, and that was, goodness sakes, that was in the 1800s they found it there. So it's a very famous monastery. You can see pictures of it. I don't have any with me right here, but you can see pictures of it, and it's where supposedly this letter was written by Muhammad himself. Take a look and see that handprint that's at the bottom there, that black handprint. That is Muhammad's handprint, according to the monks there at St. Catherine's Monastery. So he was the one that actually wrote this letter. He was the one that talked about really saving the lives of the monks, and that's why it's such a it's used by the Christians there, and that's why I hate to have to debunk it, because the Christians even there today like to use it to protect themselves, because that's what the letter's all about. It supposedly was dated to 625 AD. Now the traditions, yet the traditions tell us that there was nothing sent until 628 AD, according to what even the Islamic traditions. That goes against that whole idea. Ibn Sa'd in 845 in the 9th century. Remember, everything's the 9th and 10th century. We have nothing earlier than that. In the 9th century, about 845, he writes and he says that there were 47 writings by Muhammad. But now, Muslims say he didn't write it. It was his secretary, Zayd ibn Thabit, that wrote it. And in all of those 47 writings, you can go look at the tradition today. There's no reference of this letter, this Ashtinami letter. It just doesn't exist. So that suggests that it's probably a fraud. We can support that even better, because take a look. Can you see a minaret there on the right hand side? See the minaret? There were no minarets that early. The minarets don't even get introduced till the 9th century, and they were never used until the 11th century. So what is a minaret doing there in the 7th century in 625? So you can throw that out. Look at the word sultan is referred to. You can't read it, but it's there in the writing. It talks about the sultan. That was not known until the 10th and 11th century, referring to a man named Mahmud of Ghazna. He was the one that first used that title for himself. So that is 10th and 11th century. That's 350 years later. So no way could this have been in the 7th century, suggesting again that this letter was written after the 11th century. Mosques are mentioned in this letter, yet there were no mosques that far north, not in 641, not until 641, because there were no Muslims up that far north, not until that time. You can't have a mosque without a Muslim, right? And the jizya rates that are mentioned in this do not agree, were not decided, by Christians. The Christians didn't decide what taxes they were to pay. The Muslims decided. So that's completely fraudulent. The name Malak Mukara, which is the angel of proximity, that is first introduced in a Sufi writing about Mutanabi in 965. That's the 10th century. Again, 340 years later. What's more, it's written, if you look at the languages that are used on that letter, they're written in Christian, Egyptian, and medieval Arabic. Obviously, this is not an Arabic that existed that far south that early. The Arabic that was used in the central part of Arabia was known as Sabbaic Arabic. So it's got the wrong Arabic, but it's got the Arabic that the monks up there in Egypt would have used. It's Coptic Arabic. It is Christian Arabic. It uses Christian phraseology, proving that this was written by the monks, not by Muhammad. So when was it written? Well, before I do that, it also mentions demi laws. The demi laws that are there, that you can repair churches, that you cannot force women to marry you who are not of your religion. That does not go. That completely contradicts what the traditions say. That contradicts what you find in the Hadith, and certainly contradicts what you find in the Tafsir and the Tahqiq. So you can see this is obviously a letter written by Christians for Christians. So when was it written? Well, the monks in St. Catherine's Monastery in the 16th century, so we're talking about 1500 AD, they needed protection from the marauding Muslims all around them there in Egypt. So they forged this letter and then added Muhammad's name in his handprint there to give it authority in order to safeguard their monastery. And it worked. It worked. And to this day, they have been protected by this letter. But it's an 800-year-old fraud. Don't tell the Egyptians, please, because they don't need to go start marauding that monastery. And that's why when I put this up there and I gave this reference to it, I got some really nasty retorts from Coptic Christians there in Egypt. They didn't like that I was showing that this was a fraud. And, God bless them. I can see why they were angry. But we've got to show when there is a historical anachronism, and this is one. Here's another one, the Constitution of Medina. The Constitution of Medina, according to the Islamic traditions, remember, the Islamic traditions are the only one that refer to this. We don't have any paper called the Constitution of Medina. It doesn't exist. The one you're looking at there on the right is nothing more than a modern day facsimile of writing out the Constitution. And it's only about 30 different articles. Now, according to the traditions, this was written by Muhammad when he moved to Medina from Mecca in 622, between 622 and 624. Most of the tradition says it happened almost immediately. It was a constitution with the Ansar who lived there in Medina. They were already there. They lived there. They've been there for hundreds of years. And the Jews that lived there, the Banu Kainuka, Banu Nadir, and the Banu Qurayza family, those three families especially. So this is a constitution that supposedly gave them a set of laws and not laws, man, that's not the right word, relationship, how that they were going to relate to each other. Now, it's fascinating because when you read it, it looks very pro-Jewish. Yet, if that were the case, then the Jews should have retained a letter like this. And there is no reference in any Jewish records of any constitution in Medina. So you would think that they would be the first one to retain it because it really puts them in good light. We can't find any archaeological evidence of any Jews in Medina at all that early. There were no Jews that far south. It was called Yathrib at that time. And this is Dr. David. I can't remember his name right now. Islam as Others Saw It. David. It'll come to me, his name. But this is the book that was written in 1997 that refers, and he did Hoyland, Dr. Robert Hoyland, not David. Dr. Robert Hoyland. Have I talked about him before? I did. I showed his picture in remember way back at the very beginning. Dr. Robert Hoyland is the only one to have actually gone to all the documents and all the articles and all the any inscriptions that he could find, any manuscript that he could find from the 7th century. Because there's nothing there from Islam. There's just nothing at all from Islam. He went to all the surrounding tribes and all the surrounding peoples and all the surrounding artifacts. And he went from all the way up in Syria to Jordan, all the way down to, there's nothing in Arabia. He had to go down to Yemen, what is today Oman, those countries. And he tried to piece together what was going on from all these artifacts. And he noticed that there were no Jews at all. There was just no Jews that far south. They were up in as far away as Tabuk up in the north. But look where Tabuk is. That's way up near the Gulf of Aqaba. That's over 900 kilometers further north, or about 500 miles further north. So he said there cannot be a constitution with Jews this early. There were no Jews there. What's more, a lot of the material contradicts the Sirah and the Hadith treatment of Jews, which was very cruel. This is very nice. The isnats for the constitution, these are the list of names. So-and-so got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, because everything was oral tradition back then. They were confused and they were contradictory with different versions of different lists. So he said, this is really not authentic. And the Quran does not refer to any constitution Medina. And you'd think it would be in the Quran there, but it's not there at all.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting, no Jew would sign a constitution, because as soon as you read the constitution, the first article stipulates that Muhammad would have authority between God and man. Now, would you sign a treaty like that?
Not at all.
No. Why would the Jews, who had a tradition that goes back by that time 2,600 years, why would they sign a treaty that gave another man who's not even from their city, another man who certainly was not in the prophetic line, another man who didn't even know Hebrew and never read any scripture and never even knew about their scripture? Why would they give him authority to be an arbiter between God and man? No Jew would sign that. So you can see this has huge amount of problems. And so therefore, most scholars are saying this is nothing more than a later redaction from the traditions back onto the 7th century. So it first appears in Ibn Hisham in 833. That's 200 years after Muhammad. Jews themselves should be careful about. The Muslims should be careful about accepting this constitution, because it contradicts so much of the Quran view of Jews. It actually puts them in good light, and that is not what you find in the Quran. The Jews are not in good light. It's over and over again. There's hatred after hatred. There's reference after reference. Do violence to the Jews. Make war upon them. That's in chapter 9, verse 29. Have nothing to do with them. Yet the Constitution is very benign. So the conclusion, people like Hoyland and Andrews, these historians, they consider it a fraud. But because there was no Jew that far south, and the only source for it comes from the 9th century Muslim traditions, much too late and too far away, too far north. Thus, it is nothing more than legendary. The Constitution, therefore, cannot support any notion that Muhammad existed in the 7th century. What about the Doctrina Jacobi? I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker, because the Doctrina Jacobi doesn't refer to any person named Muhammad. It just refers to a Saracen prophet with a sword who has the keys to paradise. Now, it was a Christian polemical tract written in Tunis. What is today Tunis? What is today North Africa? Carthage, the city of Carthage. Well, what is now Tunis? The word it is the city we call Tunis today. It was called Carthage back then. Written by a Palestinian and a Christian. So he was a Christian apologist writing in Palestine about this Saracen prophet who has the keys to paradise. Here's the problem. No Saracen, no Muslim would ever say that Christ was the one to come. In chapter 33, verse 40, it said that Muhammad is the last prophet, not that Christ is the last prophet. So that contradicts the Quran.
Yeah.
It assumes also, as written in 634, that this Muhammad or this prophet is still alive. That doesn't say Muhammad, it just says the prophet. So obviously he hadn't died yet, and that's too late. That's 2 years too late. And why would a Muslim prophet be talking about the keys to paradise? That confronts the Islamic tradition much more so. That comes from Matthew chapter 16, verse 19. That comes out of the New Testament. So this is obviously a Christian writing this, who had known about it. This prophet fits a Judeo-Christian monotheistic background. He's referred to as Christos and Mashiach, which is the Hebrew name. It would have been in Arabic if this had been authentic and written about him. So it's obviously that this is not the Muhammad of Islam. What's more, it is written in Aramaic, not in Arabic, and Jews would not have known Arabic, obviously, but Muhammad would have known Arabic, not Aramaic. So you can see it's in the wrong language with the wrong time with the wrong person. Conclusion, there is no reference to Muhammad by name in this document, no reference to this prophet being a Muslim or belonging to a religion called Islam, nor any reference to a city called Mecca or even a book called the Quran. He could have been anybody. Sounds more like an Arab Christian brigand employing the status of a prophet to gain himself more credibility and authority. There's just nothing Muslim about him. So the Doctrina cannot support Muhammad in the 7th century. So who is this referring to? We pretty well know who this is. And this is Umar, who was from Lakhmid. He was a Lahmid king. He was a Christian. He came from what is today Kufa, what used to be Hira at that time, near to what is today Baghdad. And he comes across, and he is the one that attacks as a Jew. Remember, first of all, he was a Jew. He came as a Lahmid, attacking their Jerusalem. And it is Sophronius who gives Jerusalem to him in 638. And that's why this is referring to it. But hold on a minute. He was doing an awful lot of fighting beforehand. That's why he's known as the Saracen prophet, because they were known as Arabs over there in what is today Iraq. What back then was called the Lahmid Empire, or the Tayyaye, the people of the Tayyaye. Now, proving that this is nothing more than that person. What about in the Quran itself? Muslims say, he's in the Quran, and the Quran is written in the 7th century. Therefore, Muhammad was there in the 7th century. It was written in 652, they say. Now, a good friend of mine, Murad, from the Middle East, he helped me with this, and he says, take a look. There are only 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran. There they are on the screen. Chapter 3, verse 144, chapter 33, verse 40, chapter 47, verse 2, and chapter 48, verse 29. When you look at those 4 references, in every case, the word Muhammad means the Blessed One. The Blessed One. The Blessed One is no more than a messenger. The Blessed One is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the last of the prophets. The Blessed One, believe in that which he has sent down. And then the Blessed One is the messenger of Allah. So in every case, it is a title. It is not a name. None of them refer to someone called Muhammad. Muhammad is known by almost everybody. It was one of the most common names for those who were going to war. Umar called himself Muhammad whenever he went to war, the Blessed One. Abdul Malik referred to himself as the Blessed One. We're going to get to that in the next slide. Also, you have Muawiyah referring to himself as the Blessed One. There are so many people that would use this because they are the blessed of God. They were actually fighting for God. They were doing the jihad for God. Therefore, they refer to themselves as the Blessed One of God. That's why in the Quran, it looks like this is referring to nothing more than the Blessed One of God. It could be Jesus. This could be referring to Jesus. Conclusion, if this is not a man at all, remember the man Muhammad does not really appear until the 730s, another 30 to 40 years after this, then Muslims cannot use the Quran to support Muhammad's existence in the 7th century, and one of the foundational pillars of Islam begins to fall. What about the Dome of the Rock? And I'll end with this one. If you look at the Dome on the Rock, it's there in Jerusalem. It sits there above Mount Moriah. We talked about Moriah. That's Marwa. That is the Holy of Holies. That's where the Temple of David is. That's where Abraham supposedly was going to sacrifice his son. That's why it is so important. That's why it is full of tradition, from Jewish tradition. And that's why when Abdul Malik, who now controlled from Tripoli all the way to Afghanistan, he controlled all this land. When he's there in Damascus, he comes down to Jerusalem and he builds that building you see there. That's called the Dome of the Rock. Now, that building has been destroyed and rebuilt about 11 times. So the only original part of that building is where those 2 green arrows are pointing, the inner and outer ambulatory. That's the part that you need to look at. Don't look at the dome itself. Don't look at the outer structure, because those are all from 1800s. They're from the late 1800s. So they're a little over maybe 120 to 130 years old. The building you need to look at is where those 2 green arrows are pointing. And that is where you find the inscriptions. Now, when you look at those inscriptions, those earliest inscriptions, that is where you find the reference, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah. There's only one God but God. And the Blessed One is the messenger. There is Muhammadun Rasulullah, means the Blessed One is the messenger. What is and who is that referring to? Well, when you look at all the other inscriptions, they are all attacking Jesus Christ. They're attacking his divinity. They're attacking the Trinity. They're attacking his sonship. Say not 3, for God is one. Say not 3, for God is one, and he has no son. That's from chapter 4, verse 171. So that would be attacking his divinity, the Trinity, and the sonship of Jesus, all in one fell swoop, in one verse. That is there on the Dome of the Rock. So when you're looking at that, if this is attacking Jesus and his divinity and the Trinity and his sonship, then it's obviously when you see this reference, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, there is only one God but God, and the Blessed One. Who's the Blessed One? It's Jesus. He's nothing more than a messenger, is what it's saying. So he's nothing more than a messenger. This is not saying that Muhammad is the messenger of God. It's saying that Jesus is nothing more than a messenger, because it's attacking the divinity of Jesus. It's doing what all the other verses say. So you've got to put it in the context of the interambulatories of the other inscriptions. And that's why it's very clear that this is not the man Muhammad. This is more than likely the man Jesus. Conclusion: if that is correct, then the Muslims cannot use the Dome of the Rock to support Muhammad's existence in the 7th century either. And once again, we find another foundational pillar of Islam beginning to collapse. Now, just to a conclusion, there you see them all in front of you. You can see the Ashtinami letter. That is a 16th century forgery. There's the Constitution of Medina. That's a 9th century forgery. The Doctrine Okobi, that is not a forgery. The problem is, it's not the right man. They've got the wrong man. It's nothing more than a Saracen prophet. It's more likely that this is Umar, who is Ilyas ibn Qabisa, or known as Muhammad himself. But it doesn't refer to him as Muhammad, and he is the one that comes in 638 and destroyed and conquers Jerusalem. But how could this have been written in 634, referring to that event, unless, of course, the Doctrine Jacobi was written afterwards and redacted back to 634, as we're finding with a lot of these documents. When you look at the Quran, the 4 references to Muhammad in the Quran are possibly more than likely referring to Jesus and attacking his divinity, attacking his Trinity, and attacking his sonship. They're attacking the Monophysites, Christians, who are the Byzantines. And that's why the Dome of the Rock is built, if you see that on the right, and that's why the Quran was created. The Quran was created to attack Christianity. The Dome of the Rock was created to attack Christianity. No wonder you have these references to the Blessed One, the name Muhammad that became the man later on in the 8th century. Now that's for today. That's enough for today. We'll then continue it, and we're going to next look at the coins. And the coins are exciting. Correde, wait till we get to the coins, because when we get to the coins, then you're going to see an enormous amount of material that I find is probably the best material. Now, how do I stop sharing screen here? I don't see it here.
Okay, so I'd remove the screen, and it stopped sharing already, because we're right back on the screen right now, both myself and yourself. Okay, so we have a couple of greetings right here before I get to what I think should be the question. So we have a greeting from Kofi. Kofi is saying, "Good afternoon, Dr. J." He's actually watching you all the way from Libya. All right, so Bra Kofi is usually joining us on this program. He's always joining on the program, and I've always seen him on the program, and he's watching all the way from Libya. Also, we have Bradibai. Bradibai is saying shalom. Okay, I know he's watching from Nigeria. We also have Derek Jones. All right, so we also have Derek Jones saying hello, Saz. We also have Shaiji Masham. Shaiji Masham is actually watching all the way from Kaduna from the northern part of Nigeria.
Wow.
Dr. J, please, you need to pray for the northern part of Nigeria. Is really be very hot. Yeah, it's really be very hot down there in the northern part of Nigeria. So a whole lot is going on. So
good to have you on board.
Thank you. And then we also have our brother, Umar Yassi. Umar Yassi was actually formerly a Muslim, and not just a Muslim who actually studied in the madrasa, but to the glory of God, is now a Christian and preaching concerning the salvation that can only be found in Christ towards the Muslims as well. So he's actually watching all the way from Uganda. So Christians from Uganda.
How are you, Umar?
Also, we have Babatunde J. Tumobi saying, "God bless you guys. Thank you very much." Also, we have Mikhail. Okay. Also, Mikhail is saying, "Love." Actually,
all of you are those of you who are just signing in. You're all in Nigeria. You're up in Kaduna. One is from Liberia, and also in Uganda. Listen, this is exciting. This is material that you need to use, but especially those of you like Umar, who is up in Kaduna, who is surrounded by Muslims. You need to be, this is the kind of material that you can just sit back and let it work for you, because it is visual. I've given you timelines, and I've given you pictures. I've given you maps. Therefore, you don't have to memorize all this material. Just use these. What I would suggest you do, every one of these slides that we have put up, grab it, do a screen grab of these slides, and then print it off, and then just show it to your Muslim and say, now you've got to defend that. How is it that you cannot find Muhammad anywhere? You guys are in the battle. I'm so glad that you're able to use this material, but use it to its good effect. What we're finding here, and also not in the States, but when I'm heading off to El Salvador on Thursday, then I'm going to head off to Nicaragua after that, and I'm going to be teaching all this material in those countries, so that they can use it all over the world. But grab the slides, print them off, and then just show your Muslim friends. How are you going to deal with the fact that there's no reference to Mecca on any map? What are you going to do with the fact that there was no trade route going through Mecca, either from the land or from by sea? And then what are you going to do with every one of these letters, like the Ashnami letter? That is a fraud from the 16th century, or the Doctrine of Jacobi. That's a fraud. That's not a fraud, sorry. That is not even referring to Muhammad. It's referring to Umar, who is for Lakhmid king, who is a Jew to begin with, then converted to Christianity. Nothing Islamic about him. So these should be able to speak for themselves. Let them speak for themselves, because next, in 2 weeks, we're going to go look at the coins. Wait till I show you the coins. The coins are probably the best evidence, because they are from the 7th century. They have images on them. They have written text on them, and you will see not one of these coins from the 7th century, though they're from that area where Muhammad supposedly lived and grew up, and where all the caliphs were. Not one of them is Islamic. They are all Christian coins. But that's for another few weeks.
All right. Also, we have a comment from my Muslim friends. I believe this is a Christian. I think I know who this is, and it's saying shalom in the Arabic. In the Hebrew word. Yeah. All right. Also, Bro Ola is usually one of the first. In fact, for a while now, he's been one of the first person that usually appeared on the show, and he's been very consistent right on the show as well. Bro Ola usually goes to the Speaker's Corner. He's actually from the UK, and he's a Nigerian, but he's in the UK. So
Ola, if you're there right now, if you're up in London, go down to Speaker's Corner and protect our sister Hatun. She's there right now. She was going to be there in about another 5 or 10 minutes. So if you could go down there and help her out, she needs all the protection she can get. She was stabbed 2 weeks ago, and so we want to make sure that we keep her protected so she doesn't die.
Amen. All right. So here's a question from Derek. Derek is asking, I thought it was the Jews and the Christians that refused to acknowledge Muhammad as a prophet, and he exiled them, and they met the disbelieving Mecca. So have I been deceived by the Islamic scholars? So that's the question he's asking.
Derek, that's the $1 million question, and this is the problem. You thought that, but how did you think that? Because everything you thought comes from one narrative, and that's the Islamic narrative. We call it the Standard Islamic Narrative, SIN. You can see why, because the acronyms fit right in place. So the Standard Islamic Narrative has always started from that position, that it was the Jews and the Christians who refused to accept in Medina. Now we know from history, what history is telling us, there were no Jews that far south. There were no Jews in a place called Yathrib. It was called Yathrib back then, not Medina. So if there were no Jews there, then what do you do with all those stories of the Banu Qurayza, the Banu Kanuka, the Banu Nadir, those 3 different Jewish tribes? Obviously, they're not even historical. So if you don't have Jews there, then you don't have any confrontation between this man named Muhammad. But remember, where did he come from? Mecca. There's no reference to any place called Mecca until 741. He died in 632. That, to me, is a problem. If there's nothing written about this city that he was born in and spent his first 40 years in, if there's no reference to this city, then I would suggest history is debunking all this. So what you need to do, Derek, you need to go back to all those traditions and just throw them out. They're too late. Remember, they don't appear till 833. Muhammad died in 632. That's over 200 years after the fact. And they're redacting what they think happened in the 7th century, but they're all being written way up in Baghdad. That's hundreds of miles away and hundreds of years later. Too late, too far to be authoritative. Corredi, you're
Mike.
muted.
Yeah. I just discovered that now. Thank you very much for that, Dr. J. Derek went further to ask, what about the Qurayshi tribe? But you mentioned that in between your answers to him. And then we also have our brother right here.
Hold on a minute, Coredi. He's asking another question. There's Qurayza and then there's Qurayshi. The Qurayza are the Jewish tribe. Qurayshi are supposedly the Meccan tribes. Here's the irony. We can't find any reference to any people called Qurayshi that early. There is no Qurayshi tribe. There is no Mecca. If there's no Mecca, then of course there's no tribe. If there's no tribe, then what are you going to do with these traditions that refer to it? Remember, the only time you hear about the Qurayshi is not till Ibn Hisham. And Ibn Hisham writes this in 833, but that's writing and redacting it back to 632. So it's redacting it back 200 years. And that's why I would suggest there's no such thing as a Qurayshi tribe. We don't even know of any documentation that talks about anybody named the Qurayshi. What's even more damaging, if the Qurayshi are the one that have a dialect that the Quran is written out today, then why is it of the 30 different Qurans that we have, 22 of them come from Kufa, which has nothing to do with the Qurayshi? That's in Iraq. That's just southwest of, Baghdad. So you can see coming and going, this idea of Qurayshi, you can just completely throw out of history because it is not historical. Nothing that earlier is called Qurayshi. They're the wrong people. Don't get them confused with the Qurayza, because the Qurayza are the Jews and they're way up in what is Tabuk. That's way up by the Gulf of Aqaba. That's hundreds of miles away, about 500 miles too far north.
All right. Okay. So we also have a question right here from we have a question again it's not a question actually. Brola is saying, Dr. J, watching from London on my way to the speaker's corner. All right, I think it's just
tell her that you were talking with me this morning, and do bless her up. And I think they go out and they have coffee afterwards. Go with her, and they love to talk about what happened at the corner, and they love to pray together. Pray with our dear sister Hatun. You can stand in there for me and just tell her that I send my love.
Amen. All right. So we also have Bracola actually saying here, God bless you, Dr. J. And he's also saying, well done to me. Thank you very much. We also have Kwame here. Kwame Ide. Greetings to you all, Dr. J and the host. Again, Kwame, also we thank you for actually sending your love. So this is how much we can take, Dr. J. It's already 2:00 right here. And we've done about 1 hour or so. So we want to really appreciate you. We want to thank you for your time and for your efforts. By the way, Dr. J, Dr. J is actually not in this. You guys can see he's not in his normal, place and all that. But then he could still help us, to do this show even from wherever he is at this point in time. So, Dr. J, want to thank you.
I'm in a cabin up in the mountains here in the United States, and you can probably hearing people going in and out. They're going in and out because this is a missionary cabin. We're at a big camp, and we're really hoping that the internet would not go out on me. But listen, God bless you. This has been fun being with you for this hour.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Dr. J. God bless you. So, folks, we're still going to be bringing Dr. J back 2 weeks after. Next week, we're going to be having another guest on the show. But then after the guest, we're going to be bringing Dr. J again so we could look at the coins and some other things that are very much important related to this. So thank you very much for Dr. J. God bless you for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time and your effort. And we want to say bye to you for now. All right. So, folks, thank you very much for staying with us till now, right from the beginning of the program. Next week, Lord willing, we're going to be having Barakal Desmond on the show. He's going to be talking about polemics. Okay, so and that's one program that you also want to take a look at, because talking about the issue of polemics and all that, a lot of Christians are looking at it. Do we need to engage in this? And that is exactly what Dr. J is engaging in. All right, Dr. J is a polemicist, and then he's doing this to the glory of Christ. So we're going to be having Barakal Desmond next week, Lord willing. He's going to be talking about the same issue, introduction to biblical polemics, and then immediately after that, we're going to be having Dr. J back, onto the program, so that we can continue more and more of the things that we have been talking about. Also, I want to inform you that we're social. You can actually check us out on Facebook. That's Season Apologies on Facebook. On Instagram, that is Season Apologies also as well. And also on Twitter, that is as Seasoned A. If you want to check it out on YouTube, that is Seasoned Apologies. That's S Apologies, all right, on YouTube. If you others want to reach out to us on WhatsApp, the number number to reach out to us on WhatsApp is actually on the screen. That is 234-8127-999-591. Okay, if you're reaching out to us right outside of Nigeria, you have to add the code. That's the country code plus 234. Okay, 8127-999-591. So that's how you can actually reach out to us on the program. Also, if you want to reach out to us, you want to send us an email, you can do that, and that is at info@seasonapologies.com. And if you want to go to our website, that's www.seasonapologies.com. So those are ways that you can reach out to us. Also, we're on Patreon. If you want to reach out to us on Patreon, we're also on Patreon, and you can support us. So you can simply go to patreon.com/seasonapologist. All right. That is how you can actually reach out to us. Also, I want to remind you, Lord willing, very soon we're starting the Battle of the Art show that I've been telling you guys about. I've been talking about the Battle of the Art. It's an offline apologetic videos and recordings we're going to be having for some time now. We'll be talking about it, but Lord willing, we're starting this month. And to give you a tips, to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, let me just give you an intro. Okay, I'm going to show you the intro video, and I'll encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you can have updates and get notifications when updates are coming up. So let me show you the video, and then we're going to be wrapping up for today. Hi, my name is Kuridelawe, and I want to tell you about an important program that is coming up. That's a Christian apologetic program called the Battle of the Art. Now, the Battle of the Art is a Christian apologetic program that seeks to explain the Christian faith to people of the other faith, and also seeks to also respond to the people of other faith as well. Now, in the Battle of the Art, we're going to be having interviews, we're going to be having short videos, we're going to be having discussions as well. So it's going to be a program that is full of information for primarily the Christians and then those of other faiths as well. So you want to make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you can get updates when the videos started coming out. Now, if you have a question or you have a topic of discussion that you do see us discuss, make sure you send a mail to the mail you're seeing on the screen so we can get this information and then respond or even have some of these topics in our future episode. So thank you very much, and watch out for the videos. All right, folks, so that is it for the Battle of the Heart. Make sure you actually subscribe to the channel, and you'll be getting more information and update concerning the program. Okay, I've just seen a comment right here. This comment is actually coming from a dear brother, Mufti Peel. All right, so here's what the comment is. Blessing, brother. Dr. J started my interest in this part of the ministry. Oh my God, I wish Dr. J sees this, but no problem. You're still going to see it all the way. Okay, Darren Jones, thank you very much. You're thanking Dr. J. Okay, I appreciate you for that. Also, Johnson Adelaja, Pastor Johnson, thank you very much. Thank you very much for also your your appreciation as well. So, folks, this is the end for the program today. Like I said, next week we're going to be hosting our brother from Ghana, and that is Brakal Desmond. He's going to be talking about introduction to biblical polemics. It promises to be an interesting program, and I wanted to watch out for that. My name remains Corridella Wayne. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
We love you, Lord, we love you. Father, we give you all the glory. You are my rock, my strength, and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace, and my shield. You are my everything. You are worthy to be praised. You are my rock, my strength, and my trust. In you I live and move and have my being. You are my shelter, my peace, and my